We're gonna go to this. So Trump apparently is actually pressuring the European leaders to halt Russian oil purchases. White House official says, and there's a reason for that. There is a reason for that, and the reason is that there is a European deal, and that European deal might actually fail because of its ridiculous demands, because of its ridiculous... the deal will... Several members of the European Parliament are saying that they will block the European trade deal because the conditions of that deal are basically giving Trump everything he wants and not getting much in return. And among those conditions are buying a ton of energy from the United States, which Trump is very, very eager to push, which is why he also wants Europe naturally to stop buying oil from Russia, which in a weird twist, in a really bizarre turn, ends up being a good thing for Ukraine if Trump pressures Europe to stop their dependency on Russia for energy, which actually fuels the war. President Donald Trump told European leaders on Thursday that Europe must stop purchasing Russian oil that he said is helping Moscow fund its war against Ukraine, a White House official said. That is very comical considering that Trump is not enacting any extra sanctions on Russia. Trump is not punishing other countries for buying oil from Russia, like India, for example. Trump is not doing anything to combat the Russian shadow fleet that sells oil and basically is more an ally to Russia than anything. But now that he really, really wants Europe to buy oil from the United States, now he says, oh, please stop buying oil from Russia because it fuels Russian war machine. This is just ridiculous, but also kind of true. And for very cynical reasons, Trump is actually pushing for a good thing here because Europe, of course, should stop buying oil from Russia. So let's continue. Trump joined a call of the coalition of the willing countries led by French President Emmanuel Macron in Cube, says, on top of the Russian shadow fleet, Russia also sells gold on the open market that they get from Africa, right? Which should also be targeted by sanctions and whatnot. Yes, that absolutely also should be targeted. So he joined the call of the coalition of the willing, led by French President Emmanuel Macron, who were meeting on security guarantees for Kyiv in the event of a peace deal with Russia, which seems a very far-off proposition. That seems to be a very, very far-off proposition right now. Peace talks with, well, a peace deal seems like a pretty far-off proposition right now. President Macron and European leaders called President Trump into their coalition of the willing meeting. President Trump emphasized that Europe must stop purchasing Russian oil that is funding the war, as Russia received 1.1 billion euros in fuel sales from the EU in 1 year, the official said, which is admittedly not that huge an amount, but it's still far more than Russia should be getting from Europe for buying energy. The president also emphasized that European leaders must place economic pressure on China for funding Russia's war efforts, the official said. You know who else should be putting economical pressures? The US on Russia, okay? The US should be pressuring Russia for peace. But that is, of course, something that Trump will never do. Trump will never pressure Russia. Trump will always just endlessly threaten Russia with severe consequences in those little 2-week intervals, because I guess Trump operates in 2 weeks time frames. It's weird. The mind of the president of the United States is difficult to grasp. The European Commission has proposed legislation to phase out EU imports of Russian oil and gas by January 1st, 2028, which Hungary opposes greatly. So hopefully Trump can somehow persuade Viktor Orban to find an alternative, because Slovakia and Hungary have been very, very unreceptive to um, getting off Russian oil and gas. I'm surprised that no one talks about the crimes against civilians the Russian Africa Corp is doing. Maybe I'll talk about it in the next stream. It's been a long standing thing at this point. Do you rebranded Wagner? Right. Let me see. Trump has been frustrated with his inability to put a stop to the fighting in Ukraine after he initially predicted he would be able to end the war swiftly when he took office last January. He predicted that he would end the war before taking office, after victory in the election. And then 24 hours, 100 days, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 50 days, 2 weeks, 10 days, whatever. It keeps shifting, it keeps changing, but no consequence. So nobody cares, especially Putin. The officials said Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen were among the leaders on the call. The Coalition of the Willing meeting was on security guarantees for Ukraine. President Trump questioned their seriousness while they continued to fuel Russia's economy and war. The president made clear that this is not his war, and the Europeans must step up as well, the officials said. I find it very almost comical that suddenly, now that Trump has huge interest in Europe buying American energy, now he pressures Europe to stop buying Russian oil. Of course, he will never pressure Russia directly. He will never try to stop its shadow fleet. He will not do anything against Russia, which means that Russia de facto will still have free reign to just continue its war against Ukraine on its own terms. That is the reality of the situation. I'm surprised that at this point, Trump has not partially lifted sanctions against Russia, to be quite honest with you, considering his attitude towards his best friend, Vladimir Putin. But, there's still time. It might still happen. All sanctions options on table after despicable Russian attacks, says U.S. Treasury Secretary. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it, okay? When the Trump administration says that all sanctions options are on the table, it means nothing, okay? Actions speak louder than words. Trump has been warning of super huge, serious consequences time and time and time again, and it never has translated into any specific consequence. So we will have to wait and see what happens. We will have to wait and see, and we will have to actually see if Europe does a good job in phasing out Russian energy.